Welcome back, you guys. Kick back and relax as we dive into another episode of Skip to Saturday. Hello, everyone. I hope you guys are having a lovely day and that your week has been terrific. So in today's episode, I got a very special guest who's going to be joining me in a bit. In the past few months, I've been, wondering about ADHD and dyslexia, although I haven't been diagnosed with it and I never got myself tested. I wonder, whether or not I have ADHD or it can be something else, I don't know. But the reason why I say that is because when I'm having a conversation, like this happened with my aunt just recently. We were sitting at a restaurant and we were talking about ADHD, ironically. And then I remembered something that I was supposed to share with her. And I started talking about that. I was like, oh, I remember what I was supposed to tell you because it was taking me forever to remember what it was. And it finally popped back into my mind. So I was like, let me just say this now before I forget about it. And then we started having a conversation about that. And then she remembered something. And then I brought up another conversation. And then what started off as a conversation about ADHD turned into something totally different. And then we forgot to loop back to the original conversation. And that has happened to me more than once. So I wonder, do I have ADHD? I don't know, but maybe I should get myself tested just to confirm. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about understanding what a disability is and how people who are disabled can excel in life if they're given the right tools. So I'm really excited to welcome you guys, Dr. Nasser Siabi, a true pioneer in assistive technology and disability inclusion. As a co-founder of MicroLink, he's helped over 2 million students with disabilities earn their degrees and has worked extensively in the Middle East and Africa to improve education and employment opportunities for disabled people. He's also actively involved with global organizations like UN NGO and GBC Education, advocating for a more inclusive world. He's received numerous awards and honors, including the prestigious OBE, which is the Order of the British Empire, for his remarkable contributions to disabled people. He received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Diversity Awards and has been honored by the British Dyslexia Association, the National Association of Disability Practitioners, and has been twice awarded the Director of the Year by the Institute of Directors. Let's welcome him to the show. Hi, Dr. Nasser. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Hi, nice to see you again.
Yeah, and it's really nice to have you here. So you are the co-founder of MicroLink, correct?
Correct.
Yes. Okay. So tell me a little bit about your company and what inspired you to start it, and how did your journey in this field begin?
Oh, that's such a long answer, but I'll try to keep it brief. I came out of university in 91. I finished my doctorate in computer science and microelectronics, and then I briefly worked for a year for my brother's company. It was a very successful, established computer company in UK. I worked for him as a purchasing director, so became his head of purchasing. It was good to begin with. It was quite challenging to get the best deals for him, but it was boring for me. After a while, I kind of didn't really like it. So I thought of an idea which was quite innovational at the time, innovative, because there were 10 or 15 companies like my brothers who were doing the same thing, competing with each other, but they were all buying from the same manufacturers at very low discount. So I kind of thought, well, it would be cool if I go and get all together and act as a consortium. And then we could get bulk discount and they can still compete, but at least we get things cheaper. And it worked well to the point that I managed to get like 20-30% additional discount from major vendors like Intel, Microsoft, and all that. It was amazing because then all these companies were each turning around 10 million pounds, which was about at the time about 17, 18 million dollars per year. And they all suddenly became a buying power of about 180, $200 million company. So by doing that, obviously I could improve the bottom line, make more profit. But the whole thing fell apart because one of the consortium members very bizarrely said, well, how much money do you make out of this? I said, well, does it matter? I said, yeah, of course it does. I said, well, you make £500,000 a year additional profit. He said, well, I know, but if you're making a lot of money, that won't work. I said, well, I'm not going to make a lot of money. I'll make about £2,000 a month from each member. So that's around £200,000. It's more than I earn. I said, but does it matter? He said, yes, of course it does. So the whole consortium fell apart because they kind of wanted to not for me to make any money. Anyway, that was just a good idea. It didn't really work.
Okay.
So then I went back to what I was good at and started selling computers for my brother's company, this time on a commission basis. Okay. And I made quite a lot of money in a year. I suddenly earned around £300,000 by selling computers that they couldn't sell.
Okay.
And then again, that wasn't really that exciting because selling is not something I enjoyed doing. By chance, I was working with the university here. By chance, they said, we have some disabled students who would need help, support on the computer setup across the country. Could you do it? And since I could use my brother's company to deliver and do the whole installation, I said, yeah, I could do it. So I ended up talking to some of them, and I realized these poor kids were suffering from all sorts of conditions, disabilities, and on top they had to buy very difficult specialist software, assemble it, learn to use it, and then use it for their studies. And I kind of thought that was really not going to happen ever. So I went back to the authorities and the university, said, look, this is going to end up in tears if you don't do it properly. They said, well, what do you suggest? I said, well, let me bring it together and just deliver it to them as a solution, as a package, and also train them and also look after them for their 3 years. That was a great start. And then 10 years later, I was more or less doing that for 70, 80% of the students, disabled students across the country. So that came to thousands of students. And 30 years later, that same scheme is now helping around 80,000 students a year. So that was really a very humble beginning. But the idea was that disabled people have got enough to deal with. They need just less problem and less hassle of using the solutions to help them out. So you don't want to give them extra headache and extra burden. Make it easy for them. And that concept is what really then helped me to set up things for employees with disabilities across the world as well.
Wow. What was the spark that made you realize that this was the path that you wanted to take?
That's good question. I had some lived experience of disabilities at a young age.
Okay.
And my business partner as well. Both of us had lived experience. My business partner was a very successful finance guy, young, in 80s, went to the stock market and did quite well for his age, driving Porsche 911s when he was 18. And he didn't really go to university because he was making so much money to begin with. And eventually realized it's such an unhealthy kind of a lifestyle. So he came back, he went to university and did a degree. When he came out, obviously, he wanted to get a job, and it wasn't money. He wanted something with purpose. Myself, when I felt, when I was younger with my disability, I couldn't really keep up with my peers and my siblings. We're all, because of my eyesight, I wasn't really fully participating in classroom. So when I managed to get that sorted at the age of 18, I kind of very quickly caught up and went to university. And of course, I'm sure shared the same course with your dad. And when I went to do my master's and doctorate in electronics and computer science. That kind of always stayed with me, that we could achieve our full potential with additional help and support. So for me, finding these disabled kids who really needed that extra help to succeed in their education was really kind of my calling. It was my purpose to try to help as many as I could. And of course, if you do things well, you also make money. So that was a good dividend out of doing the good deeds. So yeah, I felt by helping them to succeed in their education, I'm changing the world for better, but certainly because I was in a very niche market and rather kind of a pioneer, had no competition. So which means I could actually also make a decent profit out of what I do. But really the purpose for me was to change lives for better for those who have the potential but are held back because of whatever condition they are suffering from.
Okay, so there is a question I do want to ask you, but before I ask you that, what qualifies as a disability, and are there some lesser known or less visible disabilities that go unnoticed?
Well, that's a good question. See, at the moment, the world is looking at anyone who is held back because of the health condition. That's disability. If we're not talking about if you have a condition like the wheelchair users or people who are blind. That is a condition.
Right.
But if you really want to treat disability, you have to look at the barriers you face because of your condition.
Okay.
So a blind person is only disabled if they try to access information like you and I, and they can't because they can't see.
Right.
But if you go into a very dark room or pitch black cave, I bet you're more disabled than a blind person because they know how to navigate their way around it. So disability to us is not about the condition. It's about the range of environmental and potentially systematic barriers that people face because they have a particular condition. Now, those conditions could be quite wide. It could be anything from neurodiversity, like dyslexia. It could be musculoskeletal pain, long-term pain. It could be about the vision or hearing loss, and so on and so forth, including some people will even consider heavily pregnant women towards the end of the pregnancy. They can't do a lot of things that they could do otherwise. So temporarily they could be disabled. But some legal definition is any condition that has significant impact on your day-to-day of the kind of work or the study you're doing, that's considered disability. And that is really much wider in some countries than others. Some countries it's all about physical disabilities. Mental health is not included. In other countries, you have mental health, you have diabetes, obesity, all that also included. Because all of those conditions basically stop you being at your best. And hence, the system has to work towards removing any challenges that you will face because of that. I'll give you a very basic example of a person with diabetes. Okay, so you might think, what's so disability about that? But if that person requires to have insulin injection every 2 hours, and you're working in a call center, well, they're disabled because they can't stay in the call center for like 3, 4, 5 hours. They have to go out on the regular breaks to do that. So to them, unless they have that ability, flexibility, then they're disabled at work. It's quite subtle. And someone with mental health condition, again, we all have mental health challenges in our lives. But if it's significant that you can't actually do your day job, you need a chill out, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, go away to cool down somewhere, or to listen to some music, or even have no noise around. That itself is a kind of otherwise will literally develop a serious anxiety and problems that will end up in meltdown, and they will just be completely dysfunctional. So these are all lots of conditions that could, by themselves may not cause any disability, but if you start using certain systems and environment, then you suddenly become disabled. An autistic person could do the job perfectly well in a quiet room. The minute you put them into a big gathering, lots of noise, that's a recipe for disaster. So you got to be aware of this and then make sure that you don't expose them to those situations.
Yeah, because when I think about disabled people or a disability, I'm most likely thinking about physical disability. You know, someone who is in a wheelchair or someone who cannot walk without a crutch. You know, I never really saw disability as something that is beyond what my eyes can see. So the question...
It's a common perception, unfortunately, in many countries, because we've always felt disabled people are those and have limited opportunities in life. So we have come to learn to expect less from them. So it's more of a looking at them with sympathy rather than these guys have the capability and they have the potential. And so if you give them the opportunity, they'll be as good as anybody else. And that's what's holding them back. And that low expectation starts from early years at home with parents, in school with teachers, and certainly when it comes to employment, employers say, well, surely a disabled person couldn't do a job of a able-bodied person. And that wrong perception is what's causing a lot of real talent go to waste. You know, if anyone wants to know a real talent, so what was that? Stephen Hawking, right? He was the brainiest person in this century or the past century. But he obviously, one look at him said, well, how can he even have any information, any knowledge, any experience? Because people just always are deceived by experience of never meeting someone who was in that condition and managed to actually do a good job. So that bad perception about disability exists, I'm afraid, and it's not deliberate. The bias and prejudice comes about because of the society's low expectation of disabled people. What's actually changed that narrative since COVID? A lot of people have realized they've got like ADHD, autism, and things that previously they managed to mask, not really to share, but then they can't cope anymore with all the environmental change, all the what was going around them. So suddenly they find themselves like really in a very state of almost breakdown. So that's where you start feeling, okay, what is it causing that challenge, the issue? And then you start addressing those core needs, and then you find that they get back on track, they'll be as good or better than most people. So what you have to be mindful of those barriers you start creating for them. And then hopefully if you can address those barriers, then they'll be as good as anybody else. Best example I can give you, in a classroom, you might find there are some bright kids, but they always underachieve because there's underlying dyslexia. Now, it's not a big issue. Now they've discovered why certain people have dyslexia. Let's say there's a visual stress kind of one of the causes that you can't read text. Now there are smart glasses, wearable glasses you wear. It's just like prescription glasses. The minute they put it on, they can actually read like anybody else. It's not like they're disabled. It's just like that particular visual distortion is immediately removed, so they can read like any other child. And just imagine the confidence it gives that child. Whereas previously they thought, we can't read because maybe I'm not intelligent, I'm thick. Suddenly they start believing, I'm like anybody else. And that's when you start giving them confidence and they start actually doing better. So we can do that at every level. We can do that for someone who is blind, someone who is deaf, someone who's got dyslexia, someone who's got even a skiing accident, broken arms, and they can't type. Technology will enable you to restore the kind of communication deficit you've got because of your disability. Then suddenly you have no barriers. You can actually perform as best as you could do and better than most people. Because a lot of these disabilities also cause give rise to people developing some super capabilities, super qualities that others can't have. When I was growing up, I couldn't see what was being written on the blackboard. So I didn't do very well in science subjects where it was taught subjects like mathematics.
Okay.
But because I could read books much closer,
Mm-hmm.
I developed an extremely good memory. So I could actually read and recite books by heart. And that stayed with me even to today. I don't take notes in any meetings or any class, any webinars. I remember what I've said and I remember what I have to do days after we've done that particular. That is because I compensated for my visual impairment by develop some other skills. That happens to most disabled people because they've had to fight all their lives. They start developing resilience. They start developing coping strategies and some new capabilities that most individuals don't have. So when it comes to an individual with neurodiversity, you might find they might have, let's say, I mentioned the dyslexia. They might struggle with reading and writing or spelling or whatever, but they might be super good when it comes to verbal communication, visual communication. And then you can actually see if they can overcome the deficit of communicating using reading and writing, which is how our education system is built. It's all about reading and writing. If we can actually overcome that using some technology, then you imagine you've got that other super quality that could build on top of that and makes you better than most people. It's not a surprise that you will find a lot of neurodivergent or dyslexic people who ended up in arts and media, for example, lots of A-list stars, and you could see a lot of athletes, sports people of dyslexia, because they weren't able to express themselves in written format. They developed another skill that other kids didn't really follow, and then they became very successful in the field, never ever actually worrying about that the ability they couldn't pass their English exam.
That makes a lot of sense. I was going to ask you, did you get tested when you were 18 for your visual impairment?
No, I actually, when I was young, I noticed I couldn't see with one eye.
Okay.
But I didn't tell anyone because I thought it was normal.
Oh,
when you're about
okay.
10, when you're 9 or 10, you can't see from one eye and the other eye is not very good. You have no point of reference. You don't have
That's true.
That's what. So I kind of carried on living like I did. It was only by chance my dad found me my head very close to the book. He said, why are you so close to the book? I said,
right.
I can't see. He took me to an optician, ophthalmologist, and he said, oh, your son is almost blind in one eye and the other eye is not in a good shape. And I always said, oh, how come? So I don't believe it's some genetic condition that it requires a surgery to correct.
Okay.
And that surgery is not very easy to do here, so he has to go abroad and do it either in Spain or UK. That was in the 1970s.
Okay.
So that's where I came to UK to have that operation done. Okay. And then I kind of ended up staying here because we had some political upheaval back in my homeland, Iran. So my dad said, you stay put. Just go to school. Okay. And stay there for the time being. And of course, going to school with very little English wasn't fun.
Right.
So obviously, either I had to learn English super fast in a matter of weeks, or I had to start learning maths and physics and chemistry, which I used to fail before, which I thought that was easier because I could understand those terminologies and equations, even though I didn't know much about it back home, but I was familiar with them. So very quickly, I actually learned those subjects as if I had a fresh start. So it really helped to get me on a good starting position, and then I built on that one.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's interesting. So my question was, what are the pros and cons of adults undergoing testing for disabilities? How many people may be living with undiagnosed disabilities that impact their lives, even if they haven't been formally diagnosed?
Right. So it's a very good question, and the answer to that is it's not very straightforward. Why you would need to have diagnostic? You only really want people to disclose or they share their disability if it impacts on day to day. So let me give you a simple example. A person, a wheelchair user, visibly disabled, can come to the office. They're on the ground floor, and he has a car parking bay next to the office. He can park there, come off his car, wheel himself into his desk, and carry on working. That person has no disabilities as far as he's concerned. He just comes in, does his job, go home. But if you then tell that person, I want you to go and work in the warehouse, lifting heavy equipment, that's where you have a problem. Right. So when you say that you diagnose people with disabilities, well, if I'm doing a job that requires me to do a lot of reading, but I'm dyslexic, well, I need you to tell me, can I do this job using some technology aid? Because I can read it. But if I don't have to prove I'm disabled, I'm more likely to ask you, give me this piece of software that allows me to do it. Or someone who is visually impaired, like I can't see very well. So if I want to go and tell my employer, can I have a bigger monitor, bigger screen? And if they say, well, why do you need it? Well, I've got a problem with my eyesight. Oh, in that case, can you go and get a certificate from your ophthalmologist or optician that you have a need and I'll give you a bigger screen? Well, I mean, that's a bit of a bizarre situation that happens a lot, that employers won't give you what you need in order to do your job better unless you get a proof that you need it. However, if I went to the same manager and said, look, I'm doing my graphic design and the screen I have is too small, can I have a big one? You say, yeah, you can have it the size of a cinema screen. That's because you do your job better. So how is that different to someone saying, give me a bigger screen so I can see better? I can't see very well. And that kind of a mentality is really holding back a lot of people from sharing the kind of a disability or the need, not the disability, sharing their challenges. Okay, so I think it's just to diagnose people with disability is a wrong way of going about assuming every one of them will be struggling in the job they take on.
Okay, that makes sense.
And the same goes for education. So teachers are there to teach children to learn, and that really starts with the basic reading and writing skills. Now, if they actually realize that child is struggling, at the moment, what they do is say, well, we'll send them to a specialist, to a psychologist, or a psychiatrist, or someone to diagnose that person has got reading or writing difficulty because of dyslexia or autism or something else. Now, that's firstly, it takes a long time. There aren't enough experts to do all the children who need help. Secondly, it's quite expensive.
Okay.
And thirdly, the children start feeling rather the odd one out in a classroom. And you segregate them, and then they lose their confidence, they lose their independence. And really, it's totally unnecessary. So if you have a child who is struggling to read using conventional methods, so what difference does it make if they have an app that reads the text to them? The important thing for them is to be able to see what's on the page, the content, to get the information inside the head. It's not about whether you if you wanted to become, I don't know, a writer or a typist or something, you needed to have good spelling. Yes, I can understand you need that. But if you're really struggling to spell or to be able to sort of read properly, then if the technology can help you do those and you develop your other skills, then why shouldn't you? And that's what the education and the workplaces should really wisen up to potential of making children succeed or letting them fail. And these are the kind of things that we really need to consider very carefully before we start deciding on policies and who gets help and who doesn't, and what label, what badge we put in individuals, rather than what tools do you want in order to do your job better.
Right. So you said that you can't diagnose everyone, right?
But we don't need to. That's my
You
point.
you don't need to diagnose everyone. However, if a child is struggling in school and the teacher sees that this child is struggling, but they don't act on that, or if they do and the parents don't act on that, then what is the solution there? If you want your child to succeed and thrive in life, but some parents are against getting their children tested because, like you said, it can lower their self-esteem, their confidence. They can feel like they're going to be the odd one out. So what is the solution in that? Like, how do we bridge the gap between...
I'm kind of coming back to the role of a teacher and the role of a line manager is to get the most out of, the child or the employee, right?
Right.
And so a good teacher will identify the right tools for the children to use to get the same outcome.
Right.
Now, unfortunately, that's not the case in a lot of our education system.
Yes.
The teachers only know how to teach children to spell and how to add up numbers, right? That's the extent. However, we all know that technologies are so mainstream, even young children can actually send a voice message with captioning to their parents as if they actually know how to write the work of Shakespeare. So we don't need to be held back by technology. We actually should harness the power of technology. So the teachers who find that children have certain deficits in their classroom, whether it's the short-term memory issues, whether it's about the attention, not paying attention, whether it's to do with spelling or writing or all sorts, or organizing themselves. There are lots of tools available if they care to learn. It doesn't take too long to learn them. They've learned so many other subjects. Learning about technologies that could help to overcome those communication barriers is really very much the kind of thing that we should be able to do today in modern day at no cost or very low cost.
Right. Yeah.
So we have to have a very a different way of doing things rather than actually having to completely go back to scratch. Just learn to embrace technology in ways that will overcome those barriers that children face because of our out-of-date education system. Because the education system hasn't changed in hundreds of years. It's got a teacher and students. The teacher delivers a lesson. The children go on repeat and do some practice, and then they learn. But if it doesn't work for everyone, which has never worked for everyone, it's worked for 80%, admittedly. The 20% who don't actually engage or can't engage with that method, you need to find alternatives. And now we have the luxury of technologies to be able to compensate for what the deficits they've got.
So how does MicroLink fit into all of this?
Well, MicroLink is the kind of the tool maker. We actually go and find out what people struggle with.
Okay.
And then we recommend the kind of right tools in order to overcome those challenges.
Okay.
If in a school or a university context, if the learners are trying to, let's say, study physics or maths or whatever, and they struggle with writing or reading, we offer them the kind of technologies could actually do the reading and writing. Doesn't impact on their learning maths, mathematics or physics or chemistry. All it does is helps them to actually be able to read the books and write the report using technology like voice. There are two types of technology. I mean, just simplified. One is text to speech. The other one is voice to text. Voice to text is your Siri, is your Alexa. Everything you say, it converts it into text, and it's like you're talking to your page rather than writing it. And the text to speech is again similar to what you get in all these various apps that you can actually read the whole text. In fact, the current AI, you can write the text and it will actually create a movie for you out of it. So we had lots of sophisticated tools so that those who struggle with reading and writing no longer have to struggle. It doesn't make them less educated and less clever. It just simply means there is certain things they can't do. Someone who's got who's short-sighted, wearing prescription glasses will sort out the problem. Doesn't make them any less intelligent than someone who doesn't wear glasses. So what we are talking about, similar principles, tools that enables people to compensate for the things they can't do.
What have been some of the biggest challenges you've encountered in advancing disability management through technology?
What are the challenges? Well, I'll go to what you hear about AI these days.
Okay.
Right? I mean, just one example. So the schools and universities are terrified AI is going to be a tool for people to cheat.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that is a worry, but that shows how little they know about what they do and how they do it. Because if you're testing people about their knowledge, you can only write a clever AI if you've got the knowledge about the subject, but you get the AI to write it in a nice way so that you communicate, what you're trying to communicate. So you could be a great engineer, you know how the engine works, but you don't know how to write it. So it doesn't mean that you're not good at your job. But obviously, over the decades and hundreds of years, centuries, the teachers only mark you on the things they can understand. So unless you can write it in this format, I don't think you know what you're talking about. And that's where we are trying to tell educationalists, you need to actually modernize. So stop fearing technology, actually see what you can do to harness what it can offer and enhance the learning for your students. Test them on the things that they can't get out of the AI. They have to use their creativity and let AI do the mundane stuff like writing a report in a format that you find actually interesting. And then goes to the employment. Similar concepts, similar problems. For example, AI can be quite dangerous because AI has cloud enabled, and it can take your data and you can lose. So that suddenly becomes a red flag for a lot of companies allowing some of these tools onto their state because they're worried that the data would be compromised. And data is quite important in modern employment because you have lots of law firms who prohibit you using any AI-based software to do your report writing because they're worried that you might take the data and then share it with the rest of the world. There are lots of challenges like that. So in order to accommodate some of these technologies, because they're not really mainstream, they have to do things differently. Not that it can't be done. They just simply don't think it's really needed for everyone. So why should I bother? Why would I change my ways for 5% of the workforce? They can do without. That attitude exists even in our education. It was more before the COVID where the numbers were low. But since COVID, a lot of people have come out and said, well, we have things like neurodiversity, like ADHD and others. And then the numbers have really surprised a lot of employees and a lot of educationalists that how could we have so many people who are autistic?
Right.
It all is come out saying, well, it's not that the more autistic people are being born, more of them now sharing because they're struggling to live with their post-COVID. So it's much more awareness kind of an issue rather than a new biological change in our system.
Okay.
And of course, if you realize that those same people used to perform really well before the COVID and now they're struggling, so they all know these people are capable. It's not like, this person could never, ever do a good job. They know they are capable, but they know that they're going to have some challenges. So what do we do to help them to overcome the challenges? So that's become much more of a accepting culture of we just need to be more smart about how we manage our talent. Whereas previously it was all about inclusion, to be fair to disabled people. You've got to be kind to them so that they have equal opportunity. They don't need sympathy. They just need empathy. They just need opportunity. And give them the right tools, the right training, they will do as good a job as anybody. In fact, some better. Okay, so Stephen Hawking, he demonstrated with his incapable body, he had the most capable brain on this planet. So that's the kind of thing. And there are lots of, like Steve Jobs, he also had neurodiversity. He never went to university, and by some accounts, some of the greatest minds have always dropped out of school. But then they came out so good because their brain was so good in certain areas, different. That's what made them unique, and that's what made them successful. Richard Branson, you're someone you know very well.
Yeah. What disability or what a deficiency did he have?
He's dyslexic.
Oh, he's dyslexic. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I didn't know that.
He's been very open about it.
Oh, okay. I did
He
not
said,
know that.
I have become successful because of my dyslexia.
Oh, wow.
Because he thinks differently. And because he thinks differently, that is his USP, right? He thinks he's got his superpower in being dyslexic. Well, okay, I can't read and write. I've got tons of people who could do my reading and writing.
Yes,
but
yes.
The brain I've got, nobody else has got. That's why I'm the first to take people to space, and I'm the first to do all sorts of innovative, pioneering work. That's why he's so successful.
That's amazing. It really does make a difference when you are able to harness your power and use it to your advantage instead of looking at your weaknesses or your downfalls in what you're doing or who you are as a person. That's what I've noticed.
So Michael Phelps, the great Olympian.
Yes. Yeah.
His mother, I read it somewhere, that he said when he was young, he had attention deficit, like what we call ADHD, right? So
right.
He said he had so much energy, I couldn't keep him still. So I took him to a pool, and I just dumped him into a pool, and he enjoyed it so much he wouldn't come out. Now, here's a person who could have failed by the state, by the system, by education, and he could have been a liability, a burden. Yet he became a superhero, and because he found his calling, he found what he was good at, he enjoyed doing. And that's really what we need to do in our education, to identify children's super quality and help to nurture that rather than keep holding them back because of the things that they can't do, they will never be able to do. It's like punishing children for spelling mistakes. Then it's like telling a blind child, you got to try harder, you got to see. Because I can, so why don't you try harder? And that happens, unfortunately, for parents who have children who have real difficulty. We call it biological, call it what you want, cognitive deficits, that they can't do certain things, but they're forced to. And that leaves a scar on them. That makes them hate the subject, makes them hate the education, makes them hate the people. And that really develops into a rage that later on becomes a problem to society. We've done work in UK in prisons. Nearly 70% of prisoners, inmates, have got neurodiversity in them, one form or another. 90% of them were excluded from school at some stage in their life.
Okay.
Now, I had a great privilege and honor of meeting Henry Winkler when he came to UK to do his tour. We went around schools, he was talking. So I heard that even in the US, after the SAT test, they know how many prisons to build. Because all these children who fail, they will not have a future. They might have a life of crime ahead of them. Because, if you have no future, what do? You start ending wrong choices, wrong decisions, and end up on the wrong track.
Right.
So that is not a surprise that a lot of the prisoners in most countries are people who struggled in education. And probably underlying cause of that is early years failure, lack of confidence, not being able to do what other kids could do. So they either became great athletes or great artists, or they became great criminals.
Wow.
That's the way things are developed. It's karma. You do bad things to them when they're young. They do bad things to you when they're older.
Wow, I did not even think of that at all. Oh my goodness. That's a lot of information. I'm a little taken aback because the more we're speaking about this, it's making me realize how important it is to work closely with children. It doesn't matter if they have a disability or not, but seeing where their strengths are, and then instead, like I think the education system focuses so much on subjects that sometimes they're not going to help them later in the future when they get a job, that they fail to focus on, okay, what is this child really good at? And let's make them do a little bit more of this. Or if they are hands-on learners, let's, maybe create a classroom setting where they're able to do more hands-on work than reading a book.
Yeah. Well, one of the greatest example of injustice is when children with autism, for example, when they grow up, I'm just picking on them because it's an easy one to pick, because they have limited life opportunities, right?
Okay.
Because the education has let them down, the parents have low expectation of them. Just imagine the people who least like socializing end up getting the lowest paid jobs in supermarkets, pushing trolleys, for example, because that's what the society think they're capable of, so let them do it.
Yeah.
They've been kind to them. Or someone who comes out of prison, okay, they've made mistakes, they have to pay for their mistakes and they get punished. But when they come out, they have no transferable skills, because in prison they probably get trained on doing things that in the old ways that they failed already. That's why they're in prison. They come out, they have no transferable skill to actually keep themselves out of prison. They go back in again.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of a repetitive cycle of people actually falling into a trap and they can't get out of. So all this mismatch of the talent towards individual is really, that's what's causing a lot of the problem. So if we could identify what they're good at, and there are lots of ways to identify what children are good at.
Right.
And if you were allow them to develop that talent over time and allow them space to really demonstrate, to build their confidence as well as their independence, then you'll find that they will be like anybody else that will contribute to society rather than become a burden to society. And that the autistic people, what I mentioned to you, now they can find jobs in really, really difficult jobs that nobody else can do, like cybersecurity or IT or some very difficult task that it requires a lot of attention.
Yeah.
If you find the right job for them, they'll be better than anybody else. And they do that all day long. They won't ask for pay rises. They won't ask for holidays because they enjoy doing what they do.
Yeah.
It's just finding that job that actually clicks with them.
Right.
And it's not too difficult. I mean, you can do that easily these days if you try.
What are some of the most exciting innovations or trends currently happening in assistive technology, and where do you see the future heading?
Well, it's actually, the technology is heading in a way that everything is become mainstream, even the assistive technology. So, I mentioned AI, lots of different things with AI. So we can now find tools to help AI, using these technologies to help with mental health issues, people who have got really struggle with mental health challenges. We can actually start doing automating things. So all the kind of stuff that you and I maybe struggled with at school, it can now be automated, which really allows our human creativity to do more. There is a basic education we need to learn. I'm not saying to find the lazy ways of doing it. I'm kind of saying there shouldn't be any reason why we can't progress and thrive doing the stuff that we can identify. So you can put your imagination, whatever you want is now possible to do. Even if you believe Elon Musk that you could put a chip in people's brain and you can start reading the thoughts, I'm sure it's possible.
Wow.
So the best technologies I can imagine is that allows you to live through life without facing any barriers. And that could be both in terms of technologies you can actually use every day, or could be even implanting your, but like, some disabled people or wheelchair users, they could actually put a chip implant to open gate doors for them. It's not very high tech, but it's under the skin kind of it's like your
Like a
contactless
smartwatch?
card. Yeah.
Oh,
Or
okay.
it could be just the radio waves that come. It's really, anything is possible. So there is no limitations in that. You can even see some people doing chip implants to people with physical disabilities to start walking. So they could implant it into the spine, and they could actually have restored some of their mobility. I don't think there is technology is no longer there to really excite anymore, because it's the art of
It's almost doing it
possible has
all.
been shown.
Yeah. Do you think that this will be easily accessible for everyone?
Well, it should be. It's cheap,
Okay.
available, and it's only limited by our imagination at the moment.
Okay.
If you knew the cost of not doing it is so high, then you would actually say, why aren't we doing it? The trouble is people don't count the cost of not doing the right thing. If they did, then the employers would not hesitate to hire more disabled people, and the schools would not hesitate to do different tools to make sure children succeed and not fail.
Okay.
The person who pays the bill for the prisons is not the teacher who fails the child, because immediate concern is, I've got 100 kids, 80 of them are fine, easy to handle. I'll deal with them. The other 20 will find something else to keep them busy and entertained until next year. Then somebody else's problem. That, unfortunately, is what society does to the fringe, the minority, the small. If you don't lift those 20%, then the 80% can't be lifted out. So if you do that to them, everyone, you can lift everyone. But if you start only focusing on the top 80%, then you leave 20% behind. Those 20% becomes the 80%, the problem of the society, which is much harder to fix and a lot more expensive.
Right. Okay, makes sense. So here's the one last thing before we wrap up this episode. You've helped over 2 million graduate students with disabilities earn their degrees. That's a huge accomplishment. What does it feel like to know you've helped so many students break barriers and achieve their dreams? And how does that impact your view of success?
Oh, actually, I don't know if I've done 2 million. It could be a lot less, it could be a lot more. The numbers don't really matter to me. What matters, each one of those people could actually go and help tens of others. So to me, the multiplier factor. So the 2 million, as a result of what I did 30 years ago, is now benefited. But whatever I do in the workplace, each one person we help will help 5 other people, their immediate families and their children. And so to me, the numbers it's not the numbers game, it's the impact. If I can make one person to learn to fish, then it is one family who doesn't need a handout, doesn't need, So that's the kind of a concept that what we're doing is to change as many lives as we can, because we know they become agent for change for others. That's my mission in life, is to do that as much as I can while I'm living. After me, somebody else will pick up the baton and carry on the mission.
Yeah. I just want to say a big thank you for taking the time out to be on the show. I really enjoyed our conversation. I really did. And I learned a lot from you and your stories and the incredible work that you're doing. I know my listeners are going to find your insights really inspiring. I appreciate you sharing your journey with us, and it really, truly means a lot. So thank you so much.
Thank you, and have a lovely day.
Thank you.
You guys don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. So if you're wondering what else is considered a disability, I'm going to quickly share some conditions that weren't mentioned in my conversation with Dr. Nasser. Chronic illness is one, depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, impairments that affect daily activities such as bathing, dressing, cooking, and working. In the US, to be considered disabled under the Social Security law, An impairment must last or be expected to last for at least 12 months. The impairment must have a significant impact on your life for an extended period, and it prevents you from engaging in substantial gainful activity. So this means that you're unable to work or earn a substantial income due to your impairment. I always was under the assumption that people with a disability can only go so far in life. There's a cap to what they're able to achieve. But really, the truth is, if people with a disability are given the right tools, right, and the right support system, they can accomplish anything that they put their mind to, literally. I know it's like a cliche saying, you can do anything you want as long as you put your mind to it. But it's really true. Nothing can hold you back. Nothing can hold anyone back. And I believe everyone deserves a fair shot in life. That's my opinion. I also want to mention that when we were having this conversation and Dr. Nasser pointed out that criminals end up being put back into the system, right? Because they come out, they have no skills or anything, and they just go back to doing what they know, right? I agree with that. In the same breath, I know that in the United States, there are reform programs. So if you go to prison, you can make something out of yourself. You can earn a degree from prison, learn skills so you're not falling into that same cycle of crime when you get out. And I don't know if every prison does this, if they offer a reform program, but I do know that there are some that have these programs to help people stay out of prisons. So I think that's a really good thing. And going back to the heart of the conversation, I really hope for our future generation, they're given the right tools to succeed in life early on so they don't have to struggle. A kid with confidence will thrive and build a better world, just like what Dr. Nasser is doing with his work. And I just don't see why we all can't succeed. So those are my 2 cents that I just wanted to add. That's it for today, you guys. Thanks for hanging out with me today. If you enjoyed today's episode and learned something, share it with your friends and family. I always appreciate your love and support. Take care of yourselves. Stay safe. Stay healthy. Try not to get sick. And tune in next Thursday for an all new episode.